Right. Hi, and welcome to A Conversation with Emily. It's February 7th, 2024, and I'm here today with Ann Gillies. Ann has a PhD in Philosophy of Professional Counseling. She's an author, an advocate, and a public speaker. Welcome, Ann.
It's good to be here. I'm glad to get to know you. We're going to have a great time.
Yes, yes. So you have a PhD in Philosophy of Professional Counseling. What is that? What does that look like?
It sounds like a mouthful, and it is. Basically, I'm trained both in theology and psychology,
Okay.
and right through my entire academic career, so that I speak from both. So I'm a Christian believer, and I speak from both the spiritual sense. And a good foundation in that, and a Judeo-Christian perspective, but also my area of expertise in psychology was trauma counseling. So I, for 25 years, counseled adult survivors of complex trauma. So mostly women that had been chronically abused in childhood, kidnapped, raped, those kind of circumstances, but that it was chronic. So it wasn't a one-time event, but it was, it's called complex traumatic stress disorders. So that's where I kind of put my hat, and this sounds crazy, but I loved the work. I loved the people. And so I've got a lot to say about trauma
Right.
and a lot about in the area. I'll just add a couple things. My areas of research then have been for the last 35 years on trauma, attachment, child attachment, parent to parent, and peer attachment, and sex and sexuality. So specifically gender and sexuality. So I kind of come with a lot of information and understanding about these kind of issues. So I'm glad to be here.
Good. Well, so sorry, I've just got this pop up here. What's our sorry about that, Anne. So with that, all that knowledge and understanding and training that you have, you've used that and you've written a book. One here that really popped out to me is Closing the Floodgates,
Mm,
Setting the Record Straight About Gender and Sexuality.
yes. Sorry, go ahead.
So in this book, I just read the quick like back of the book here. You discuss like gender ideology, how it affects our communities, and how it affects our schools. So do you want to? I'd love to hear how you feel about SOGI in our
Oh,
schools. With
well,
all of this knowledge that you have, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
okay. So I was writing that book in 2016. I just completed the manuscript and sent it away to the publisher when Jordan Peterson came on the scene, and about the trans bill, the pronoun bill. And as I'm listening to him and knowing that I've just sent this book away, I'm going, yes, somebody gets it. Anyway, so that was kind of the beginning of that. The book is about it's about the sexualization of our culture from the 1940s onward. And so it's not really an easy read, although I tried to simplify the academic stuff so people could kind of grasp it, but sometimes you have to take it in small bites. And there's some very disturbing things in there
Yeah.
that people say to me, I just don't know if I can read this because it's disturbing. And I get that, but we have to be able to face the reality of what has been a part of a very strategic plan for 7 decades. And if we can't face the reality, how are we going to help our kids? Because they know this stuff, and now they're being totally bombarded, and it's been going on for 20 years in our education system at least. But certainly the last 5, we've just seen this huge elevation of indoctrination of sexual ideologies within our education system. So yeah, that's kind of the background I have. And it's not just, I want you to understand, this isn't just about LGBTQ. Certainly that's a big segment, and there's a lot of there's some stuff in that book about the beginnings and how that has transpired, and there's a very complete agenda that they wrote, which we are seeing fulfilled before our eyes. But it's about the entire sexualization of our culture and how it has affected our minds. It continues to it affects every single person, whether they know it or not. You know, you flip on the TV, you walk down the street, you go to a theater, and it's so prolific that you can't even get away from it anymore. I mean, there was a time where you could avoid some of it. You know, you could put your head in the sand and avoid it and not turn the TV on. And I mean, you still can do that and people can try, but you can't unsee what you've already seen.
And
And
I would
that's the problem.
argue that that behavior is what has allowed it to get so carried away, is the putting our head in the sand bit.
Oh, yeah. Well, in the back of that book, I had published a book on trauma the year before, but at the back of Closing the Floodgates, the last chapter, so I continually use this phrasing, parents unite. Parents stand up, parents stand tall, parents stand out and speak up for your children. So this was 2016. And I very naively thought people would listen. And I thought politicians would listen because I gave that book to most federal MPs, some of the certainly some of the provincial MPs, as soon as it was published. And there's a handful of them that responded and they understood it, they got it. But their hands really were largely tied, and we know that. Well, their hands are tied because they want their jobs, right? And they want to serve the people, and they want to know the best way to do it. And sometimes attacking the issue head on isn't always the best way, although I'm a little bullheaded. I'd like to attack it head on. Let's deal with this. Let's excise this out of our school system. In fact, get the kids out of the school system because I don't think there's hope for it anymore. I believe over the last 2 or 3 years that we're in a place where I don't think we can resurrect public education into a place where it will be anything but morally corrupt. It is so corrupted from the inside out and from top down. And so that's kind of why I keep saying to parents, get your kids out. I know this is costly. It will mean sacrifice. That's a huge thing. But where there is a will, there's a way. And I know there are organizations now coming out and standing up and saying, we're going to help. So I'm hoping those will be more fleshed out in the future. So anyways, there you go, my diatribe.
So, specifically with SOGI and your background, what would you say is the effect that SOGI is having on young children? Like kids who are being exposed to this literature that we're finding, which personally, and again, I'm just a mom, what do I know? But I would classify it as cartoon pornography.
It is.
Totally sexually explicit. I have two children, both of them under the age of 10. And as a mother, I would be horrified if I found out that they were accessing these materials. So, with your background, with your trauma and dealing with survivors of abuses like this, what is SOGI doing to our children right now in our public education system? What is going to be the effects?
Well, first of all, I want to say to you, never say you're just a mom. You are a mom par excellence. Let me tell you, when you have children and you're a mom, we need to be patting you on the back, especially in these days. I have 6 children, and I mean, and they're all growing, by the way. And just what you said about cartoon porn, my son, I hate paying for these books, and I'll get to your question, answering the
Yeah.
question, I will. But I ordered, I'm just trying to think of the name. It just has escaped me. Oh, I'm very sorry. I can go get it. It's sitting up in my shelf, but it's one of the books.
Yeah.
I think, anyways, um, and I ordered it, it came, and my 32-year-old son was, downstairs because he was home, and I just leafed through it, I mean, this is a couple years ago, and I took it down to him and said, "Hey, can you take a look at this and give me your opinion?" And he looked at it and he said, "Mom, this is straight porn."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, thank you. Thank you." And this is a young man, you know, he doesn't have his head in the sand. So, absolutely, it's porn. What this whole system, the educational system and what's been put in place is doing, it is changing the brains of our children from a neuropsychological perspective. What we are doing, and it's been doing it for the last 70 years for us as adults, right? Changing the neural pathways. So that means things that were unacceptable in the 1950s.
Mhm.
By the 1960s, became, oh, that's no big deal. By the 1970s, well, we need to embrace this, you know, we will offend people if we don't agree with them. It was just starting, right? Well, fast forward to the 90s when this material began to be put in our schools and integrated into the education of our children in one form or another. And it wasn't on steroids like it is now. But nevertheless, you know, bit by bit, it has changed the brain of our young people. For instance, when you consider young women viewing pornography in the 50s, unheard of. In fact, young men, I mean, or men, had access perhaps to Playboy, right? A magazine,
Mhm.
and it wasn't explicit like it is now. It was nude pictures, but not everything that's there
Right.
now. Now a child, so we've come all this way over time, so over 70 years, our brains and our minds have come to this place where we now accept so much that was not acceptable before. And it is not abnormal to see, well, for instance, lingerie ads.
Mhm.
So I wrote a paper, Sears catalog didn't in the 50s and 60s didn't have like photos, live models. They didn't do that. And
Right.
then it kind of progressed little by little. You get away with more and more. And then came Victoria's Secret. Oh, forget that. We're gonna display these models. And I mean, whatever your view is on all this, Victoria's Secret's porn. It's
Well,
porn.
so,
When you
so
look at them all, when you look at the ads, I mean, they're not happening anymore, but go ahead. Sorry, that's
that's
my
okay. Don't be sorry. Some might argue that's just progress, Anne. And that's just progress.
oh, great. Yeah,
And
of
so,
course. I would hear those arguments and free to be me. Let me be me. This is me. Let me be my authentic self. Well, you be your authentic self in your bedroom.
mm,
And you don't flaunt your stuff in front of our children. And, you know, so this is, and I mean, my generation went through the, you know, Woodstock and the sexual revolution and all that kind of stuff. And so many in my generation, which is old, have totally embraced all of those things. You
right.
know, in the 50s, living together was a sin. You know, it was almost unheard of. And now, well, hey, for the last 30 years, it's commonplace, right? Now, also all of the things that were morally um, repugnant
Mhm.
are now mainstream, and it's okay. That's how our brains have changed, and we don't even realize it because we begin to accept things that never would have happened before. And
And
for our
a good way to do that is to start with the children, right?
well, that's what's happened, and so what we have, I mean, we started with adults, but they're harder to train,
Yeah,
especially
they're kind of set in their ways. They've got their own ideas already.
So the generation previous to mine, I mean, they could not understand any of the stuff that was going on. I mean, they did not accept it.
I
But
wonder
this
what they
generation,
would say today.
Well, my mom's still alive, and she has a few things to say. Anyway,
I'm sure.
but here we go. We then bring all kinds of sexual innuendo, training and teaching on sexual expression, sexual identity, sexual behavior, and the how-tos to grade twos or younger.
So I've started calling it pleasure education. SOGI supports pleasure education because it's not teaching any safety. And why so young? Why are we starting so young on this topic? I know that for me as an adult, if I run into, say, a 7-year-old who's up to snuff on terminology like about blowjobs and 69, those things, to me, that's a big red flag. To me, that says this child has had access to things that they should not have access to. They've seen something they shouldn't have seen, whether it be in real life or on TV or in a book, or somebody has done something to this child that is very
Exactly.
inappropriate. And so now, with SOGI, this terminology is being taught to our children at school by their trusted adults, educators. And now, certainly, I want to be clear, not all educators are doing
That's right.
this. And I don't want to paint everybody with the same stroke, but certainly there are some who are, and it's having quite the effect. So now we've taken away the red flag. They're now, if we
Yes.
normalize young children using this terminology and speaking about these topics, how do we know when to look further in to see if this child is safe?
You know, this is you are just nailing it, Emily, because what I've said is that, from a psychological perspective, trauma perspective, child abuse perspective, there were some pretty good lines
Mhm.
that you could delineate a child because of the red flags, right? Even in the school system, teachers kind of went, well, I'm concerned about this child, or, church leaders might say, there's maybe something, we're worried about this child, or call CAS, right? Because of the behavior or the words the child was using, because they were not normative for children of that age, right? And
Right.
so
And
that's
that's just it. It's not normal for a
it's
child of
not
that
normal.
age. And
Mm-mm.
and I'm for me, I'm frustrated in trying to understand why our leadership is trying to normalize it. And it's becoming increasingly frustrating actually. At first, you try to approach it with reason, logic, and compassion, but we haven't been met with that in
Oh,
response.
heavens.
So people get shut out of school board meetings. And then they get issued no trespassing for the next year. We get mics turned off. Like, if this is supposed to be good for our communities, good for our society, good for our children, why aren't we allowed to engage in it? And that to me is another red flag. That's predator behavior on a mass scale, and it's coming from the top. Which, how do we combat that?
Well, we keep going because in 2018, I gave a delegation to our local school board on the transgender child and my concerns about what I was seeing happening in the education system, the truth about this political term. It's not a medical term. And so you have 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes. They let me speak. Um, and they were not happy. Anyways, the next year there was some brand new research, and I thought I need to educate. That's my passion. I want to educate, I want to inform, I want to be able to do what's best on behalf of the child.
Hmm.
And so I contacted the school board again, and they said, send in, the speech you want. And they notified me and said, no, you cannot get this speech. You cannot present. I am a taxpayer. I am a grandma. I am a professional. I
A
was,
professional. This is what's
yep.
happening.
So,
They're cherry picking the professionals who they're accepting
oh,
information from.
exactly, because it has to fit the certain narrative. So I ended up suing the school board. That was
Oh, good for you.
2019. Yeah, 2019, it got in the, they didn't respond and things and went on. Then COVID hit.
Mm.
So it didn't get resolved till a year, like 2023. And by that time, what the board said was that it was too delayed, blah, blah, blah. And they really took exception that I would dare to say that transgender was not a real thing. It's gender dysphoria, used to be gender identity disorder. We need to call it what it actually is. There are no transgender children. So they were mad.
That's
So
I
anyways, they disallowed it. And I had to pay the school board $5,000.
no.
Yes, yes. And so I the school
What was the title under that you had to pay? What was your fine called?
it was legal costs for the school. Yeah.
See, this is another
Anyway,
issue. This is another issue that we have, a big one as parents, especially over in here in BC. We're really getting treated poorly by our leadership, our administrators, and our school boards. And we would love to start legal action, but regardless, they get their legal advice paid for either
of course,
by the government because they're government employees, which is our taxpayer dollars,
yes,
FYI,
ma'am.
or if they lose, we could end up paying. So either way, we're paying their legal fees plus our
Well,
own. And so
yeah.
it's like it's very, very frustrating. But I wanted you said something there, and I don't want to forget to ask about it. You said transgender child used to be called gender dysphoria, gender identity disorder. Can you break down what that means for our viewers?
Okay. Well, gender identity disorder, this was prior to 2013. And that's 2013 is really where you see this happening, this trajectory with the transgender movement, which it was called in 2015 by Time magazine or the New York Times, either one, whatever. So gender identity disorder was a diagnostic tool to be able to identify the symptoms that a child was having when they were gender confused. So they were confused about what sex they were.
Mhm.
This was so let me just add a little bit because in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in 2013 even, it says the actual number of adult transsexuals was 0.014.
Mhm.
0.014 of the whole entire population. Now, they may have been a bit low. Nevertheless, it's a very it was a very, very rare thing to experience gender dysphoria at that level and then be diagnosed. And then diagnosis was one thing. There was treatment for it.
Right.
Treatment was talk therapy, behavioral therapy, family therapy, because here's a stat for you, you probably never knew. I think it's about 1990, there was a paper done and it was, I don't have it in front of me, of course, but the results of that paper on these gender identity disordered children, boys, because the highest percentage was boys, were very,
That's right.
very few girls. And so the paper was on the family, dynamic. And what they found was that 53% of these young boys had a mom who was borderline personality disordered. Mental illness is at the root of this. Now, this isn't to beat the parent up. Of course, people
Mhm.
say, oh, you're horrible. No, we need to help the family. We need to help the parent. And that's what psychologists used to do. They used to practice, psychotherapy, and they used to practice family therapy, not affirmation, which, by the way, I got to share this. So this is my book up. Sorry. It came out in the summer of 2023, The Ultimate Deception, The Truth of Gender Affirming Care, which gender affirming care it is the biggest mistake is not even the word. Actually, I have a quote here.
It's horrendous, gender affirming care. If we practice gender affirming care with any other illness out there, we would be, I mean, it's monstrous. We don't tell somebody who suffers from anorexia that they look overweight. We don't tell somebody who suffers from bulimia how many calories they just
We don't
ate.
agree with them. We don't even
Right.
agree with them. In fact, we would be called lunatics to agree with them. And so this whole thing is really a momentous step in the dark. And it is so dark. And it's totally captivated by our medical and psychological associations, of course. And because now Bill C4 in Canada went through and people are like, oh, well, it's not a big deal. We shouldn't be forcing anyone to change. Therapy isn't about changing someone.
Mm-mm.
It's about helping someone if they desire change. And this, you would never suggest to someone in any other kind of mental condition or a psychological condition or marriage condition, oh, you can't change, don't bother.
Mhm.
Like, but now, yeah, we can. And so now when Bill C4, they made it all about homosexuals and lesbians predominantly, but really the agenda was as well, big time, gender dysphoric children, and it's in the bill, and that you cannot treat them um, with any kind of perception that they could change their gender. Well, they've already changed their gender, and the schools are trying to treat them. Teachers are trying to treat them, telling them who they are and who they aren't. And yet, therapists and others, and including their parents, have no say
Mhm.
in helping these children. So yeah, oh yeah, I've got lots
So,
to.
like, just to be clear for our viewers, that's what Anne is saying right now is fact. In Canada right now, a therapist or a counselor, somebody that you would go to for mental health help in Canada right now, is not allowed
That's
to
right.
suggest that somebody who is suffering from gender dysphoria or gender dysmorphia or confusion with their gender is incorrect. If a 7-year-old walks into a therapist's office and they are a biological female and they say, I am a boy trapped in this body, the counselor or therapist must affirm that statement. They are not allowed to challenge it or have a conversation around it or even say the question, are you sure?
Or
They're
what makes you think that?
and
What?
that's fact. So that's a very
Yeah.
important thing for our viewers to know that this is not something that they're trying to put into the works. It is already in the works.
And that's why it's dangerous to take your child to a therapist. It's
That's right.
dangerous.
That's
Not
right. Because
safe.
if you're not an affirming parent, well, now they can get child services involved, and that's real in Canada as well.
Oh, that's been for a couple of years. That's been more than that. But yeah, that you can have your child taken out of your home if you do not agree with their delusion. This is a delusion. Whenever you are not facing reality, you're
Mhm.
deluded. That's just a reality. So why would we collude with delusion? And to think that our medical professions have all sold out because of the dollar, money, so we're just going to go along with it instead of using their brains, instead of using their education, instead of staying the course they know to be right, they know to be true, they know to be helpful for these individuals. No, they're just going to cave and go with whatever they're told by the elites to do. Well, it's time to shake it up because these people need to lose their licenses. We need lawsuits coming, and that's going to happen. I've been saying for quite a few years, let's bring down the school boards by individuals who have an agenda, and it's not pro health and pro child, it's pro the narrative, which is harmful to the children. Anyways, you
It's pro money
got
making. It makes a lot of money to transition a minor because it's not a one-shot deal. It's a lifetime commitment.
lifetime, lifetime medicalization.
Mhm.
multiple surgeries should the child continue. And at the end of the day, they find out they're not any happier. Well, of course not. Medication and surgery does not make you happy. I mean, medication for someone who's very depressed does not make them joyful or happy. It just kind of brings them up so they're kind of not going to kill themselves, you know?
Right.
And so now we have this whole area of medicine that is so corrupted and has so damaged our young people. And it is, yeah, I mean, my prayer is that we will see those who are um, practicing affirmation therapy, those who are promoting that the idea that a boy can be a girl,
Mhm.
or telling parents you need to accept what your child's saying because they'll commit suicide. That's a
Oh,
blatant lie, blatant lie. It is
could you
so.
imagine ever saying that to a parent? Like, how do these people do this? How,
Oh, and get away with it, and the parents, I mean, as a parent, and think about 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, as a parent, this is all new to you, and this is
Mhm.
what, your doctor or therapist is telling you. Well, I guess I have to because my child will kill themselves. What a horrible thing. Those doctors in my mind,
It's a
I'm
pretty
so
good way to
mad.
get a parent to jump on board with something. I mean,
Oh,
can
it's
you think of
totally
a
intimidating.
scarier thought to plant into a parent's mind? Um,
And here's the deal.
Horrifying.
If your child is having suicidal thoughts, you need to find out, talk a little bit about them, see how serious those thoughts are. If they are working toward a plan, you have a responsibility to get them to emerge.
Mhm.
Suicidal, deal with it. You don't transition them because they're suicidal. These children, most of them have between 3 and 5 pre-existing mental health
Yeah.
conditions. And the parents also, as I talked about, can have some pre-existing things. So you have children that are already mentally compromised. And then you place right in front of them all these suggestions, especially these children, many of them, like I have stats that go from 16 to 32%, but I also have a paper that was published, a study published last year that said that most of these children that are now declaring they are transgender, most of them, if not all, are either already diagnosed with autism on the autism spectrum, or they will be,
Right.
or they will be. And so the GSA clubs, the doctors, the teachers, the psychologists, psychiatrists, they are taking advantage of these
Mhm.
children at such a level that it is, well, it's just, it's unspeakable. It's
It's horrific. It's
unspeakable.
horrific. And so, would a child then, with a diagnosis of autism, who is more likely to fall prey to gender ideology,
Yep.
would they also be more likely to fall prey to social contagion? Because from what I can see in the numbers, in the rise of percentage of how many young people are identifying now on the spectrum in one way or another, um, it just feels inaccurate, these numbers. Like they are not real numbers.
You're right. They aren't real numbers. Well, okay, so let's talk about peer pressure and social contagion for a minute. Peer pressure. These children are now going, they go to school every day. I had um, a young father talk to me on Monday. He's a journalist and he's very concerned about what he sees. He's only been in Canada 4 years. He's from Dubai. His wife already wants to leave. She's so disgusted with all of the the
Mhm.
stuff, sexual stuff. Anyways, um, where was I going with that thought? What was your question
Gender
again?
dis or social contagion.
Yes, yes. So, yes, children who are compromised in any way. often are just so longing for friendship, looking for someone to love them, and especially autistic children because they're socially a little different, they don't kind of blend in so much, and they have a harder time making friends. So, for instance, my children's book is called Whatever Happened to Emily, and it's about 2 young girls who meet, and then they go to school together and all that stuff, and Emily has some tragedies in her life, and then in her, you know, before she's a teen, she's preteen, she begins to socially transition. But you see, the whole thing about all this is that there's so much social contagion, so much educational misrepresentation of sexuality and truth that children who are already compromised are just the most vulnerable. So what this agenda, and I'll call it an agenda, against the family is doing, it is taking the most vulnerable of all our children and putting them on a
Mhm.
conveyor belt, a medical conveyor belt to horrific things for the rest of their life. And if they decide to detransition, that's harder than ever, because they've
Mhm.
already been living as the opposite sex and now they're saying they were wrong. It is so extremely hard, and they have no medical help
That's
to
right.
detransition. You only get help if you are going to go with transitioning, and you're going to and you're going to get it paid for, but our tax dollars.
That's right. You
So
can
this
get
is a
a double
testament right now.
mastectomy for gender affirming purposes paid for by all our tax dollars, but you can't get one if you have breast cancer.
Do you know, and you're really hitting something there, Emily, because this is really, when you talk about changing the brains of our culture, the brains, our minds, but our neurologically, our brains and the neural pathways in our brains to be more accepting of certain things. We have gone from how awful it would be to have a breast removed,
Yeah.
like 20, 30 years ago, women, it was a horrible thing,
Hmm.
and it still is an awful thing.
Hmm.
And we would never, never have ever in our wildest dreams considered lopping off perfectly healthy breasts of 13-year-olds.
That's right.
What I just you probably can hear it in my voice because 'cause I've had a couple days where I've been processing some some injustices, and I'm like, I just wanna shake someone in a good way. I'm not violent, but, I really wanna shake our prime minister and say, "Kudos to you. You sold out your soul. You sold out the country. You sold out the country's children,
Mhm.
and you keep doing it, and then you lay it all at the feet of the parents and say it's our fault, you know? And yeah, so there you go. I had a little rant. That's over now. Okay.
You're allowed. It's a frustrating time. It's really hard. Um, I think like it's important for people like our prime minister, and our other leadership roles across
Yes,
the
it's not.
country for them to remember that we are all only people. We are all just people and we can only take so much. And it's like, how much more of this are we going to be forced to take? If transgender people are under 1% of our population, why are we catering
Mhm.
so heavily to that? And I'm not saying that we should ignore these issues, that we should stop talking about them. No, they should be studied at a university level by all means, absolutely, in a non-biased way
Oh,
from
good
people of
luck.
all backgrounds. Yeah, I know. And why like that's so disheartening that that's what our like you're a professional, a respectable professional, and that's your response, and that's not the way that it should be. How do we get back there? Like the progress has gone too far. We're now an incredibly tolerable generation of parents. Okay, we're the most tolerable, over tolerable. We got parents that aren't even parenting; they're best friends with their kids. Okay,
Oh, that's yes. By
and
and large.
and and to go this. it's like so far past an extra mile
Yep.
to implement these systems. And like SOGI, they're always, oh, it's not a curriculum, it's a resource guide. Well, you've gone
Oh,
past the extra mile to implement this resource guide to force 99% of the population to teach an ideology that 99% of the population doesn't live by. That would be
well,
like forcing me to teach Islam or in my home, like what would happen? I wonder what would happen if these progressive families who are transitioning their 5-year-olds, what would happen if they found out that we had a priest come into the kindergarten class to baptize the whole class?
oh yeah, absolutely. And here's the other thing, so I have another book. I wrote this last year as well. It's called Implosion. I always get it backwards. Sorry. When
That's
the
great.
pendulum swings too far, because it swung too far. And so
Yes.
it's talking about what's going on. Really, it's a really easy read. But we need to understand that there is a very nefarious agenda. Um, and there are some individuals and very high ranking levels in every sphere of influence across our land, across the world, who have an agenda to uh, really legalize pedophilia.
Mm.
And in 2014, and people say, oh my goodness, we're talking about trans children. What are you doing? Well, because there's so much interconnection with all of this. And when you think confusion, children are being absolutely confused by everything that's being taught to them. Oh, that's what I was going to say about this journalist. He said his son comes home and he can't sleep at night because his mind, he can't shut off. He's so confused and he's so upset. And he's 7 years old and can't sleep at night. This is what our education system is doing to our children. But academic pedophilia is being propagated through our academic associations, particularly the humanities. And in 2014, it was offered up um, in the DSM to actually, there was a push by therapists, psychiatrists, to actually have pedophilia removed as a classification. And once that happens, then that happened in 1973 with homosexuality, where it was removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual as a mental health issue, and it was decriminalized. Now, do I think it should have been decriminalized? Sometimes I wish it hadn't been, but people are people, and I'm not. It's not. It's not healthy in any way, shape, or form. It's not a healthy way of being. But nevertheless, we're at a place now where pedophilia probably in the next DSM will be removed. And that means that it will no longer be an orientation that can be, sorry, it will become an orientation. It will no longer be a classification of mental illness that can be treated, which is very hard to treat anyways.
Hmm.
But the reality is that it will be legalized, which means you can't even convict somebody who is
Well, they're already like
abusing
that.
children.
They're so far down the path of trying to legalize it. We've already got terminology changes, like all these
Oh,
language
maps.
changings. Yeah.
Oh, just
All these
yes.
language changing that we're going through is I mean it's on every front. It's so many different fronts. But now like I know in my region of BC, I am privy to the knowledge that there are more than 3 therapists in my area that promote the terminology MAP over pedophile. And MAP, MAP, stands for minor attracted person. Very fancy way of saying pedophile. It takes away all the negative connotation that goes with the word, which should go with the word. That's why we have it. That's why it's such an important word in our vocabulary. It shouldn't, it,
It's a
I,
word, it is a word that stirs people up. When you
mhm.
talk about pedophilia, people are immediately not only uncomfortable, but they are like, "Oh," that just makes me so angry. Like, normal people,
Yeah.
people who don't have parents,
Even
where,
hardened criminals don't put up with that
oh,
crap.
listen, no, no, no. I mean, the pedophiles are the ones that often don't come out of prison, right? Because other men just detest
And
men.
take care of it.
Yeah,
You can't cure that in many instances.
yeah.
And so now you're absolutely right. There is a big push from our higher up leadership to normalize, categorize it as sexual orientation. And all of this normalizing of this topic, sexual orientation, what's your preference? People now they introduce themselves with it, which I just find so odd. Um, what's your take on the language change and with all the pronoun involved in that, with when somebody introduces you and they present a pronoun?
Well, let's just talk about language change for a second.
Mhm,
Language controls people.
mhm.
You can control people through language in ways that you can never control people physically. And because language becomes very wrought with emotion.
Yes.
And now that we have all of the pronouns that we are forced, that's what Jordan Peterson was really irate about, that we're forced to call people by their pronouns. I will call people by their name.
Mhm.
Um, and this is the saddest thing, because these people are confused, and we've rubber stamped their behavior, and now we say, okay, even though there's a lot of delusion happening, you're very confused, you need therapy, you need help to understand who you really are. And through that process of unpacking why they think a certain way or why they believe a certain way, and you find out, well, my teacher did said this, or I did this, and because we're not taking time to listen to their stories. And so all of the stuff with pronouns, I totally disagree with. What are you doing to people? You're identifying them by a pronoun, and the pronouns are just, I mean, I go through all that in my closing the floodgates.
Well,
I
they
mean,
just keep coming,
mind
don't
boggling.
they? Every time you think you've got a handle on how many new pronouns, they drop a new z, zer on you. And what is that?
Well, and talk about, I mean, we're confused. Think about our children
Yes,
putting up with that day in and day out, 6 hours a day, having to listen to all this stuff when they should be getting an education. Yeah,
that's right.
I
And
just have,
again, I just want to point out it's not every teacher doing it, but the ones that are doing it are doing substantial damage. Definitely.
and what we've done is we have created a monster, because now, because of the social contagion and the new trans people, which are not the transsexuals of 20 years ago. They are
No.
not in any way similar. This is like transsexuals, 20 years ago just wanted to be left alone, wanted
Yes.
to be, who they were, and they needed to be protected, absolutely. But all people need to be protected from time to time. And the other issue here is that what's happened with this new trans person is all of the things that go with the pronouns, all of the accolades, and all of the people that will affirm this person in their new identity. But it's not an identity of dignity. It's
Mm.
not an identity of worth. It's not an identity of care. And it is just a pseudo identity to help them somehow feel better about the stuff that's going on inside instead of dealing with the issues. Yeah, that's
I agree. I feel
my
about
take
the
on that.
I feel like the pronouns are your first introduction to a narcissist. It's like, oh, okay. Well,
Oh,
thank you.
there you go.
Thank you for letting me know who I'm dealing with now. I can act appropriately. Make sure that I act appropriately because that tells me that at any point in time you're probably going to explode on me for something that I'm
Oh,
no idea that I've a crime I don't know I've committed.
yep. Exactly. And so remember where all this is coming from. So it's coming from high levels of academia, primarily. That's where it started. Political interests, of course, big pharma, big money. That this is just being infiltrated right throughout our whole society. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, if we stay silent at this time, we've been silent for so long, and just allowed people to walk over us, people um, who want to corrupt our families and want to destroy, to deconstruct the family, corrupt our children, and we've sat back. By and large, we've
Well,
sat back.
the thing
We
is,
understand.
strong families create strong individuals that then
Yes.
go out into the community as strong individuals, and they take on strong roles in the community. And I don't think our leadership want those roles just for anyone.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And so when you can deconstruct the family and you see what's happened, and it just breaks my heart to see what parents have been through. Parents whose children come out and are applauded by these allies who don't have a clue they really don't have a clue. They're just going with the flow. They don't think for themselves. It's like mass psychosis. And so parents then are the villains, of course, if you dare contradict a child. And these parents are so wounded and hurting, and just like
Mhm.
so many have, most have caved, because how can you stand against the whole world, it seems? And how do you stand against your medical doctor telling you these things? And how do you, because they aren't informed, and that's my area. I want to inform, and so that's why I write.
It really is a David and Goliath type of situation, isn't it? I mean, I know that I feel so small in this fight personally. I feel like I've got a lot to say. I've got a lot of good things to contribute, and the only people who want to hear are people like me. But I want to talk to the administrators. I want to be a part of the plan. Like, what brought you guys to the conclusion that we need to be teaching this to our small children? I mean, we had a teacher over here in Nelson, British Columbia, and she handed out to her grade 9 class at the beginning of the school year a form that asked for their preferred pronoun. Uh, is it okay if I use your preferred pronoun in front of your home adults? Was the term used.
Home
If
adults.
if
Yeah.
not, what is the preferred pronoun? So without saying I will lie for you, that form is suggesting that the teacher would
Oh,
be dishonest to the guardian, parent, home adult, okay, for the student. Now, I'm not sure about you, but I was a bit of a troubled teenager. I was a bit of a I was a total rebel rouser. And if at any point in time in my teenage years, any adult had said, like, yeah, no problem, I'll lie to your parents for you about anything, I would have leapt on that opportunity. And I think that a lot of the people that are making these policies or these decisions, they either A, don't have children, so they're like they have no experience in what it is like to raise a child, and two, they've forgotten what it like to be a child and a teenager.
well, and the other point is that they get paid very well to
That's
do
right.
that. But you're absolutely right, and I think, what a disservice when it's like, to me, it's like if your child starts taking drugs and you pat them on the back and say, "Oh, good job, yeah, go for it. This will be helpful for you. This
Yeah.
is going to make your life better. This is going," because you can be high all the time and you don't have, you know, what parent in their right mind would
Right.
applaud that behavior? But it's no different what we're doing, and in the sense that we are applauding bad behavior from adults, and yeah, it's lying. Now, to let you know, you may not be aware of this, but two teachers in California um, took their school board to court and won over, because they were being instructed to lie to children. That was the court case. I just read, I think last Friday maybe, that the teachers now are suing the governor.
Oh, good. I hope they win that
I think
too.
that's it. I read it quickly. So, teachers, if you're caught in this situation, it is time. We need legislation. We need to push back. And the only way to do that is, I mean, this is terrible because I never thought I would ever sue a school board. I mean, for
Right.
goodness sakes. I would never would have I mean, probably I'm the most straight by the book. Like, do you want to keep everyone happy? Probably that's why I went into counseling, not to keep everybody happy, but to help them
Hmm.
enjoy life, right? Now it's like, like that is just wrong. And so we need to see more and more legislation and more for instance, what Premier Danielle Smith has started, that's a step in the right direction. She's done a pretty good job. I'm pretty impressed. But we have to recognize that, a carrot in front of us is not the be all and end all. It's good. And she's trying to walk carefully. And I think that's wise. I think she's walking in wisdom. She's getting a tremendous backlash that parents need to
Yes.
stand up for her and to really speak out for her, because she's been listening to the parents. She's been
Well,
listening.
I think right now with the position, with the situation with Danielle Smith's recent announcement, right now the parents really need to get loud because the trans allied, the like, the LGBTQ mafia part of them all, they're having a hissy fit, and that's something they do real well. They're pretty loud about it. They're leaving phone
They're
calls, they're
they're
emailing
abusive.
complaints, it's 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 totally, in all senses of the word, they are throwing a tantrum. And we don't we want to tell Smith, like, yes, what you are doing is a step in the right direction. Personally, I'd like to see her be a little bit more firmer.
Yeah, well, there's some other
But
things. I certainly hope to encourage and challenge her on those too. But here's the deal. When you're talking about children taking tantrums, I ended up in Ottawa on Monday. And I'm going to do an interview, a video on this on Friday, but so I won't give it all away. But so I ended up toe to toe with some LGBT activists, right? And uh, so disgusted with our police. So
yeah.
disgusted. Because the police, so you have this a whole education in every area of life, including new recruits, new police coming on the scene, and the old guard are retiring. And I'm telling you, it's all woke. And so nothing um, to protect the
Hmm.
people, the parents, and there were 8 of us women. Police were lined up behind us. In front of us was a mob. It was a mob of activists, Antifa, and here are these men who claim to be women, and you know, actually, I was at peace. I wasn't scared, even though I literally was toe to toe with a megaphone right in my face,
Hmm.
just yelling in my face. And I'm thinking, why do you get away with this?
Yeah.
If we did this to you, we'd be arrested on the spot.
The
We
double
would,
standard is so
oh,
disgusting.
and people are so getting fed up with it. I hope they are getting
Well,
fed
I
up
get
with it.
called a turf. I get called
Oh,
a turf, a bigot, a homophobe, a transphobe. And the minute I turn around and say, "Are you a pedophile?" I'm stoned. It's it's like, "Oh, I see, I see. You dish it out, you don't take it."
oh
That's
no,
what
they
this
can't take
game
it.
is.
They'll
That's
fall
what this
apart.
game is.
They'll
Yeah.
fall apart because they're emotionally unstable.
That's just it. And when you get
Are
in situations like you were just in Ottawa, when you get a whole bunch of them, you get mob mentality, and it can really be a dangerous situation. So I'm glad that you came out of it
dangerous.
safely.
Well, and I turned around, there was like maximum of 5 feet between, so the mobs in front of us and the police are behind us, a maximum of 5 feet, and we're
Hmm.
in the center, us 8 women. And it's like, and we weren't yelling and screaming.
No, of course. But if you had,
We're
you'd
there to
probably have been
support
arrested.
Danielle Smith. And I turned to the police behind me and I said, I don't understand why you aren't in between us, why you aren't standing between us.
Mhm.
And they said, well, we're ordered to stand here. Well, there were like 30 other police standing along on the side, not on the sidewalk. You couldn't you couldn't walk on the sidewalk, you see, because you couldn't get through this mob. Isn't
Right.
that illegal to block a sidewalk? And then the liaison officer told me, well, the bylaw officers are coming in to give tickets for noise infractions. Yeah, I have hearing aids, so I was able to take them out, but I had a big headache the next day.
I
And
bet.
from this woman who, just out of control, totally out of control, right? And she was kind of the leader. But anyways, no, nevertheless, if we do not stand against this tyranny, our children, like I don't have to be in this battle. I'm 68 years old. Give me a break.
Mhm.
But I'm in it because I care about our children and our children's children. And we have to stand together. And as we do that, you see, if parents across the land, which is happening, if they will unite, no matter what. And I was with other Muslim women. I'm Christian, they're Muslim. And we have, different skin color. Guess what? None of that matters when it comes to your kids.
That's
We're
right.
here for our kids, and we are determined to protect them.
Well, I would just like to see education get back to the academics, and like we're more than capable of teaching our children to be good humans that contribute to society in a productive way. I think it saddens me that parents don't have these rights. Like I had no idea. I'm a parent, I got two kids. I had no idea that I don't have any rights, that I am deemed responsible for these kids until they turn 18 years old. If they
Mhm.
crash a car into somebody's house, that bill's mine to cover.
But
Um,
listen, which teacher's going to come and put your children to bed at night? Feed them 7 days a week. Which politician is going to run them to the hospital when they break an arm? What,
Rub
you
their back when they're sick.
absolutely. This is just the most ludicrous thing ever. We have
I
rights as parents because we have responsibilities toward our children.
my second child was born 2 months premature, so she had some pretty serious health issues in the beginning, her first year, and I spent that first year with her. I don't think I slept. I We did 21 days in the NICU. I slept in like a leather fold out chair, lazy boy chair for those 21 days next to her. And I did all that. She's my baby. I took care of her like I would even if she wasn't my baby. And then to go through all of that and just be told that like now she turns 5 years old and I got to put her in an education system and I don't have a say in what they're going to teach her when it comes to ideas and beliefs. Like I'm I'm sending her there with the idea that she's going to learn how to count, read and write, and learn history and science. And the science they're going to teach her is that humans can change genders, that gender is a social construct, when all of the science tells us gender is rooted in our DNA.
Let me correct you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk the real word, sex.
Okay. Yeah.
Because gender is this is part of the whole language stuff they're using against us. Gender actually is just how we express our masculinity or femininity. That's
Okay.
all it is. Maleness and femaleness. And it's different for different people. But here now, no, you can change gender. Well, you can't. You can't change your sex. You can change your thoughts and your ideas, which are associated with gender and gender roles and all that stuff. But the language is so skewed, people are so confused. And absolutely, you did that for your child because you loved your child.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and you would, if you were a nurse in a hospital, you would do all those same things too because you have passion. And this is what you do because you're passionate for children. And I just think the government has no right to tell us as parents how we have no rights
That's
because
right.
that is number one. Parents have a right and a responsibility to raise their children how they believe they should. And let me just say one thing in closing here, because we're going to get into the end. But you're sending your children, and for anyone listening that has their children in the public education system, you are sending your children to school to learn a new religion. The LGBTQ is the new religion. I've been saying this for several years. And if you and your children do not sacrifice on this altar, you will be canceled. And worse, you could lose your children. You have to realize this is a religion to replace any religious expression in Canada, any freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and your parental rights.
I agree. This SOGI, it really does trample on the religious expression rights of every single Canadian.
Yep.
But I think, I think that was a great point to end on. Just one more question, if you don't mind. What if you had any advice to parents across Canada right now on the first step to take? So this would be to parents who are on the fence, who have just become aware of the topic, who maybe they've been brought aware of it by Danielle Smith's announcement, and they don't know how to get involved. What could they do? What would be your first step that you would recommend they take?
Well, there's a lot of organizations that have come up over the last 3 to 4 years. So get informed. I mean, the first step is, okay, let's just talk about Danielle Smith's legislation, maybe waking some parent up and saying, wow, maybe I need to look into this. So if you are that parent, yes, you need to connect with other parents. You need to seek out, like, Action for Canada is very good. They have a lot of good resources. Um, and that's in BC. Well, it's across Canada, but I'm sure you have other organizations too, Emily, in your area that you would recommend. But there are many resources. I would suggest you check out Pierre Barnes's website.
ExposingSoji.com. Yep.
Yes, go to soji.com. Pierre has been working, like, I remember about 3 years ago when we first met, we were talking about what was going on, and he has just taken it upon himself to delve into
Mm-hmm.
the whole area of books in libraries and in the curriculum, and he's done a great job. So if you want information, you can get it there. So I would start, because I think what you need to do is to really look at what are your children being exposed to as far as books in the school. That's a good place to start.
Okay, yeah, that is a good place to start. And just for any of our viewers watching, maybe you are one of these parents and you're thinking, "Oh my God, how do I do that? How do I check out these books?"
Yeah,
Schools are public property, and you're a taxpayer. You're welcome to enter your child's school at any time and
good
go
luck.
into the library and take a look at these books. And so you can do it at drop off, at pickup, at lunchtime. Find out who your school librarian is, get a list of books together, and go in and take a look for yourself. Get involved, be a presence, put yourself in those hallways so that the teachers know that you are engaged with your child's experience.
Absolutely. And not only the school library, go into your public library. Go
Mhm.
and search out children's books. Just start doing some research. And because people say, well, it can't be that bad. Well, it's worse. It's
It's pretty
actually
bad.
worse. Yeah. If we're painting a really grim story, just multiply it by 10, because it is so, so bad.
It is. Well, thank you so much for sitting with me today, and it's been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate that you've taken the time to have it with me today. That means a lot. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed meeting you, and lots of good work. We need many, many more.
Hmm. Yes. Well,
Clone yourself, would you?
I don't know. You cut that right down the line. Some people would agree, and some people say, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And again, my name is Emily Duggan with Mums Against the Norm, and we are committed to keeping what happens in public education, public information. And this is Dr. Ann Gillies, is that correct?
Yep.
So she's got a PhD in philosophy of professional counseling. She's an author, an advocate, and a public speaker. And I'll put some links in the write up to this video so you can check out some of her books. I highly recommend ordering some. I know there's one that she showed us today that I'll be ordering for my summer read. But okay, Anne, thank you so much. And that's it for now.